and execs, they are afraid. 2,500 banks have closed in the last 10 years. They are afraid. 1,000 S&Ls have collapsed. They are afraid. Insurance companies are next. They are afraid. The demagoguery is to leave the impression that they should be afraid of other Americans. That somehow those jobs went from white to black or brown or male to female. That's not true. Those in the family farmers went to Conagra, Cargill. The big ones ate up the little ones. The barracudas ate up the goldfish. Where did the jobs go? And y'all write this. This is like why we're really showing up here. Unemployment 7% and rising. Recession expanding. Where did the jobs go? Zenith used to be in Chicago, making television. It made a one-stop to Texas, right to work law state, and now in Mexico. Not to elevate the Mexicans, but the lower living standards in this country. Where did the jobs go? There are no American-made VCRs. Where did the jobs go? Swin makes his bicycles in Taiwan now. Where did the jobs go? The other industrial collapse was not because of affirmative action. We didn't go from Buick and Chrysler and Cadillac and Oldsmobile to Soulmobile. We went from Buick and Chrysler to Honda, Toyota, Mitsubishi, and Mercedes-Benz. Where did the jobs go? We wear Nike, Reebok, and LA Gear tennis shoes. They're all made in Taiwan and South Korea. Don't stop there. Taiwanese and South Koreans did not take jobs from us. Don't hate them. That's not right. American companies took jobs there. Cheap labor, relaxed environmental standards, cheap labor there, high prices here, profits up, wages down, workers busted. Mr. Bush, let's discuss economic chemistry. They want to reduce matters of morality and the law down to politics and race. Say it one more time. They want to reduce matters of morality and law down to politics and race. We are not on the left as they write about. I'm no leftist. NAACP is not leftist. We're in the moral and constitutional center. We're not left or right. I went to use the bathroom in Greenville and got locked up. And the urge to use a downtown bathroom made you a leftist. March for the right to vote, a leftist. We're not leftists. Every issue that we raise is in the moral and constitutional center. Now, on this note, one of our dilemmas is more and more two names in one party. For too long, we have tolerated a constricted politics, a politics of elite consensus at the expense of the majority. In his campaign, Bush spoke of bipartisan consensus, cooperation between the parties, so far that it only meant appointing Mr. Strauss, his friend, as ambassador to the Soviet Union. But the Reagan-Bush tax shift was approved by a democratically controlled Congress. The Cold War is over. Democrat-Republican budget 1% apart. Some Democrats even attempted to take refuge in the illegitimacy of the quota debate on bench of the Supreme Court. Souter, Scalia, Kennedy, all approved by a democratically controlled Senate that we elected. I want y'all to hear this now. Bipartisanship has become a code word for the compromise of political principle. And the people are paying the price and dropping out without options. Bush got 26% of the vote. He and Dukakis combined less than 50%. There are more folk locked out than locked in. We must open up the process. That's in part what D.C. statehood is about. I'm an elected senator from Washington. We fought a war for self-determination in Kuwait. Mr. Hooks, more people live in Washington than there are Kuwaitis in the whole world. More people live in Washington than Vermont, Delaware, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Alaska. We pay more taxes than 10 states. We got more youth in the Persian Gulf than 20 states. And yet we cannot vote. They say, it's interesting how they twist the logic, Percy. They said, you know, how can an all-white Senate, 98 men, 2 women, look at a black from Georgia and have the moral authority to say no? It does make it difficult for them to say no, because they don't have the moral authority. They're not a cross-section of America. That part is right. But if you can't say no to one, how can you say no to 500,000 of the same background who live in Washington? All I want is consistency. Now, for what the press came to hear, for a minute. Will y'all bear with me? In light of these great challenges, it's a critical test for us to put the Thomas matter in perspective. Come on now. The Supreme Court's already stacked. It's no longer a Supreme Court standing for the highest ideals of the nation. It's a Republican court representing the interests of that party. It is powerful, but it is not just. Justice Thomas deserves a Senate hearing. Thurgood Marshall pointed out that the Constitution is flawed, tilted against blacks. It mentions slavery 3 times, all supporting the slave masters. It's tilted against people of color, women, and working people. When it was written, women could not vote, nor own property. White working people who didn't own land could not vote. African descendants considered 3/5 human. Native Americans could not live. It was flawed. Only the Bill of Rights saved it. The Bill of Rights is the integrity of the Constitution. It's been a long journey from race to remedy and relief and reasoning. And yet it got worse. It got worse than 3/5, which is 60% of a human being. Dred Scott, 1857, took us down to 0. Attorney Henry, we had no right a white was bound to respect. Now in 1863, we won the Emancipation Proclamation, not as a gift. We left the South unlettered, without airplanes and trains, and walked and joined the Union Army to save the Union using our bodies as cannon fodder. We won the Emancipation Proclamation. And yet, 15 years later, the Hayes-Tilden Compromise revoked our gains with the consent of both parties. 1896, 33 years after 1863, Tilden-Hayes Compromise stacked court, the laws of apartheid, segregation, Plessy versus Ferguson. In that context, the NAACP was born. Du Bois and the Walter Weiss and the Roy Wilkins, and the sheer genius of such as attorneys as Houston and Motley and Hastings and Marshall. They enabled us to reach a point by 1954 where we could correct the flaws in the Constitution. The NAACP was the only substantial organization with resistance to the court attacks on our rights that decreed us back into slavery. Now we see a similar pattern. That's why I don't want us to sleep this. In 1963, the March on Washington, Emancipation Proclamation March, Civil Rights Bill, Voting Rights Bill, then Democrats and Republicans start doing another Tilden-Hayes Compromise, backing away from affirmative action, cutting taxes, therefore find the public sector without private sector alternatives, allowing right-wing judges to take away the court in the Democratic Congress. It's a straight line from abolitionists to emancipation, to NAACP, to 1954. In the light of this reality, history is unbroken continuity. It doesn't start when you choose it to start. That was a freak in Greek mythology called Zeus. He was born full grown. He had no historical continuity, no childhood, just one day he was handed down with no context. And you know, a text out of context is a pretext. And when they try to, out of nowhere, drop down to us a leader. Out of nowhere, some philosophical Zeus. In the light of this reality, Judge Thomas is indeed a strange creature. Well, what do I mean by that? He deserves a hearing. He's the primary beneficiary of the struggles of the martyrs, Rosa Parks and Dr. King and Medgar Evers. And yet he attacks the tree that bears the fruit of their labors. That's strange. His career is a product of affirmative action and government support. His matriculation to Holy Cross was affirmative action. Working for Senator Danforth, a government payroll job, affirmative action. The EOC, Department of Civil Rights Agency, affirmative action. On the federal bench, he's on the government payroll, affirmative action. The Supreme Court, a lifetime government job, affirmative action. And yet he attacks government involvement in its measures for affirmative action. He even attacks the 1954 decision reasoning. Some of us have come to where we are without the benefits of a government job. We're forced to live in the world of free enterprise. We've gone to jail for these changes. This ain't about politics, this is about morality and law. We've attended funerals for murdered colleagues. We've had to make payrolls every 2 weeks in organizations devoted to the struggle. We've had to march for the right to vote. We had to register voters ourselves. Yet we knew we did not do it by ourselves because we were smart or fortunate. We're not only individualized, we're socialized. We appreciate that special relationship with the people on whose shoulders we stand. We've learned to appreciate our relationship with a stranger on the Jericho Road. We know that we are here today not by merit alone, but by the grace of God. Were it not for God's grace, we'd be abandoned in some gutter. In the final analysis, NAA has survived on character. It's not enough to find the way. We must have the will. It's not enough to talk about the president's plan. We must have a plan of our own. It's not enough to talk about what's happening outside in, but also inside out. We cannot complain about lack of political empowerment with 7 million unregistered. We cannot complain about lack of economic power and don't count 300 billion to build our nation and where we live. We can't complain about families and yet abandon our babies and don't have the character to raise the babies we make. Dogs raise their puppies. Cats raise their kittens. Cows raise their calves. Surely man, just a little less than God, a little lower than the angels, we must raise the babies that we make. It's our moral and ethical responsibility. This thing is about character. It's one thing to fight for a national health care plan. Where's your will to get well? Jesus came to town one day. There was a woman. Word he was coming to town. She had no insurance policy, no political contacts. Nobody knew her name. She had the AIDS or cancer. It was an issue of blood. Whatever it was, she had the AIDS, the cancer, but she also had the will to get well. She didn't just stay home and die looking pitiful. She rolled down the steps. She crawled down the road. Skint knees, heavy fingers. She crawled through the legs of the able. And finally she touched the hem of his garment. And I tell you, by her faith and his power, she was made well. Ben, when I was a little young, I used to wonder why Jesus didn't stop and look in the face and say, heal, or make some gesture, but he never turned. I understand now. He didn't look in the face because her face didn't matter. and her race didn't matter, and her religion didn't matter. Suppose he'd looked at that woman and said, now, ma'am, I know you're sweating. I see you got the temperature, but now I know your legs are hurting and your fingers are heavy, but are you really sick? How long you been sick? What's your correct address? Give me your whole name. Fill out your middle initial. If I get you well, what would be your payment plan? She could have died under interrogation. He would have lost his divinity. We must have the will to get well. I feel better now. I know it's dark, but the morning comes. I know it's dark, but the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. It gets dangerous sometimes, but yea, though I walk through the valleys and shadows of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and then turn from their wicked ways, then they'll hear from heaven, and God will heal their land. Keep hope alive.
C-SPAN 2 and its companion network, C-SPAN, are the cable television industry's networks for public affairs programming. C-SPAN 2 is now in its 5th year, providing coverage of the United States Senate and an inside look at the democratic process. If you have a question or comment, please write us at the C-SPAN Networks, 400 North Capitol Street, Suite 650, Washington, D.C. Our zip code is 20001.
Up next on Book Notes, we bring you an interview with Michael Beschloss, author of The Crisis Years, Kennedy and Khrushchev, 1960 to 1963. In his book, Mr. Beschloss provides a history of the relationship between President John Kennedy and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev and its impact on the Cold War. Glasnost and the U.S. Freedom of Information Act allowed Mr.